Dominic, the transfer needs to clear before the audit. Nie później четверга, not later than Thursday. I was carrying a tray of coffee into the conference room when I heard my son-in-law say that, half English, half Russian, low and fast into his phone, his back turned to the hallway like he thought no one was around at 6:45 in the morning. I caught two things clean as a bell, the name Dominic and the word audit. I'm Katherine Jones. I'm 64. My husband Robert and I built Jones Construction and Steel from nothing back in the 80s. One crew, one truck, and a stubborn refusal to lose. Robert's been gone 9 years. The company is still standing because I never stopped showing up. Matthew Holland married my daughter Sarah 4 years ago. Good with her. Good with our grandson Milan. Smart enough that I brought him into the company 18 months back, made him a vice president, gave him access to the books because I trusted my daughter's judgment, and because, God help me, I liked him. He always said the Russian was from his grandmother, said it slipped out when he was stressed, like some people curse in another language. I believed him for a year. I stopped believing him the morning I heard him say audit, like it was something to be managed instead of survived. I set the coffee down outside the door and didn't go in. I stood in that hallway and listened to him finish the call, his voice sliding back into Russian, smooth and practiced, like a man who'd done this 100 times before. When he hung up and turned around and saw me standing there, his face did something I'll never forget. It didn't flinch. It smiled. "Katherine, didn't see you there." He took the coffee like nothing had happened. "Big day. Frederick's got the quarterly numbers ready for the board." "Looking forward to it," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I felt. I went back to my office and sat down at my desk and didn't touch a single piece of paper for 20 minutes. I thought about Dominic. I didn't know a Dominic in this company, not one I'd hired, not one on any payroll I'd signed off on. I thought about an audit nobody had told me was coming. I thought about 4 years of watching my son-in-law switch languages on a phone call like he was changing shirts, and how many times I told myself it meant nothing. That night, I went through every financial report Matthew had touched in the last year. Most of it looked clean, too clean, the kind of clean that takes effort. But buried in a vendor list was a contractor I'd never approved, paid out of an account Matthew had set up for international logistics 8 months ago. I didn't understand half the wire details. I understood enough to know I wasn't supposed to find it. I could have called my daughter. I could have called my attorney, William Lawrence, right then. Instead, I sat in my kitchen at 11 at night and thought about every time Matthew had stepped outside during a phone call, every time his voice had dropped into a language that made me invisible. I'm not the kind of woman who waits to be told what's happening in her own company. I built this place with my hands. I wasn't about to lose it because I couldn't understand the man standing in my hallway. The next morning, I drove 2 blocks past my usual route and parked outside a brick row house near the church on Forbes Avenue. Frederick Reese had lived there since before I knew him, a retired language professor, sharp as a tack at 78, the only person I knew who'd actually grown up speaking Russian before his family came over. He answered the door in his cardigan, reading glasses pushed up into white hair. "Katherine, this isn't a social call. You look like someone died." "Not yet," I said. "I need you to teach me Russian, and I need to start today." Frederick studied me for a long moment, the way he used to study a misconjugated verb. "That's not a hobby request. That's a woman trying to understand something before it's too late to stop it." I didn't answer him. I didn't have to. What I didn't know yet, standing on his porch that morning, asking an old man to teach me a language I'd never spoken a word of, was that it would take me almost 2 years to understand everything Matthew said on those calls. And by the time I finally did, he would have already moved the first $40,000 somewhere I couldn't trace it. If you've ever sat in your own kitchen and realized the person you trusted most was speaking a language built specifically so you'd never understand what he was taking from you, You already know exactly how this feels. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, and subscribe because Matthew Holland had no idea what kind of woman he just made an enemy of. You're imagining things, Mom. You've never liked him. You've never given him a real chance. Sarah said it standing in my kitchen, arms crossed, 3 weeks after I started lessons with Frederick. I hadn't told her about the lessons. I told her I overheard Matthew on a call that worried me, nothing more. I'm not imagining a vendor I never approved, I said. I'm not imagining money moving through an account labeled International Logistics. He explained that it's freight costs for the Ohio project. You'd know that if you actually asked him instead of going through the books behind his back. I wanted to believe her. She's my daughter. She's smart, she's not naive, and she loves her husband. But I'd raised her to question things too, and watching her defend him without blinking made my chest hurt in a way I didn't have words for. Fine, I said. I'll ask him myself. I didn't. Not yet. Instead, 3 nights a week, I drove to Frederick's house on Forbes Avenue and sat at his kitchen table with a notebook, learning sounds that twisted my tongue into knots. He drilled me on the alphabet first, Cyrillic, nothing like anything I'd seen, then numbers, then simple phrases. My throat ached after every lesson. I hid the notebooks in a drawer in my office, underneath old tax files Matthew never touched. You won't be fluent in a year, maybe not even 2. Russian doesn't forgive shortcuts. But you don't need fluency. You need to recognize danger when it walks past you. At the office, I started listening differently. Matthew took calls in the stairwell now, not the hallway. He'd gotten more careful since the coffee morning. But stairwells echo. I learned to find reasons to be near them. 6 weeks in, I caught a word I recognized. Dingy. Money. He said it twice. Fast. Frustrated. 3 months in, I caught a name. Dominic again, and a string of numbers that might have been an account, might have been nothing. I wrote it down anyway. 5 months in, our controller, Carissa Patterson, knocked on my office door looking like she hadn't slept. Katherine, I need to flag something. Matthew asked me to reclassify a vendor payment as a consulting fee. It's not standard, and he asked me to not loop in accounting on it directly. Show me. She did. $21,000, routed through the same logistics account I'd already flagged. My stomach turned, but I kept my face flat. Don't change anything yet, I told her. Just keep records. Don't tell him you came to me. Carissa nodded, relieved someone believed her, and left without asking why an old woman building a paper trail wasn't already calling the police. I didn't have an answer for her. I barely had one for myself. That night, working late, I heard Matthew's voice drifting up the back stairwell. I climbed down 2 steps, quiet, careful, and stopped where the wall hid me. He wasn't talking about money this time. His voice had a different edge to it, quieter, almost gentle, the way you talk about something that scares you. I caught a word Frederick had taught me only the week before. Police. Policy. Then I caught my daughter's name, Sarah. Then 4 words strung together slow enough that even with 5 months of broken lessons, I understood every single one of them. Если с ней что-то случится. If something happens to her. I stood frozen on that step, with my hand pressed against the cold wall, my own daughter's name still hanging in the stairwell air. And I realized I had spent 5 months learning a language to catch a man stealing money. I had no idea I might be learning it to save my daughter's life. It's a life insurance policy, Sarah. That's all it is. Every responsible person has one. I stood outside my daughter's kitchen window 2 days later, my hand frozen on the back door, listening to my own son-in-law explain something I already understood better than he realized. I hadn't told Sarah what I'd heard in the stairwell, not yet. I needed more than 4 words and a name before I tore her marriage apart on a hunch, even a hunch built on Russian I'd bled over for 5 months. So I'd called William Lawrence, my attorney for almost 30 years, and asked him a question that made him go quiet on the phone. Can you pull every insurance policy filed against my daughter's name, anything new in the last year? Katherine, that's not a small request. What's going on? I don't know yet. That's why I'm asking. It took William 4 days. The policy was real. $2 million, taken out 8 months ago, beneficiary Matthew Holland, sold. Standard enough on paper, except Sarah told me, when I finally sat her down and asked carefully, that she'd never signed anything for $2 million. She remembered signing something small for $50,000 years ago, back when Milan was born. "Mom, you're scaring me," she said, sitting across from me at my kitchen table, the one Robert built with his own hands 30 years ago. "What aren't you telling me?" I almost told her everything right there: the Russian, the stairwell, Dominic, the money, her own name tangled in a sentence that started with, "if something happens to her." Instead, I said, "I think Matthew's been moving money he shouldn't be. I want you to be careful, and I want you to let me handle it." She didn't believe me, not fully, but something in my face must have reached her because she didn't argue the way she had 3 weeks ago in my kitchen. That night, I went to Frederick's house and told him about the policy, the beneficiary, the 4 words I'd caught in the stairwell. Frederick set his tea down very carefully. "Katherine, I need you to hear me. A man who hides money speaks one way. A man who's preparing for someone to die speaks differently. I need you to tell me exactly what you heard, word for word, and don't soften it for me." I told him, "If something happens to her," said gently, said like comfort, not threat, which somehow made it worse. "That could be many things," Frederick said slowly. "Concern for her safety, or a man already imagining a future where she's gone and rehearsing how it should sound when he says it out loud to someone else." I drove home that night with my hands shaking on the wheel. 2 weeks later, Carissa came to me again, this time with something that made the floor tilt under me. A second policy, smaller, $500,000, filed not on Sarah, but on me. Beneficiary, Matthew Holland, filed the same week he'd been made vice president. "He has access to HR files," Carissa said quietly. "He could have pulled your information without anyone flagging it. I only found it because the premium's getting paid out of the same logistics account." I sat in my office after she left and stared at the wall for a long time. I thought about every dinner Matthew sat through at my table, laughing at the right moments, asking about Robert like he genuinely wanted to know the man who built this company. I thought about 2 policies, 2 names, and 1 man quietly arranging for either his wife or his mother-in-law to disappear from the picture, whichever came first, whichever paid out cleaner. I called William that night. "I need everything documented, quietly, and I need to know who Dominic is." It took William's investigator 9 days to find him. Dominic turned out to be a man in Bryansk, Russia, running a shell logistics firm that existed mostly on paper, the same firm Matthew been wiring company money to for the better part of a year, dressed up as freight and consulting costs. I sat at my kitchen table with the report in front of me, almost a year into learning a language I'd started purely out of suspicion, and I finally understood the shape of what I was looking at. Matthew wasn't just stealing from the company. He was building a life somewhere far away from Pittsburgh and deciding very carefully which one of us wouldn't be around to ask questions when he left.
3 weeks, Dominic. 3 weeks and I'm done with all of it. Closed account, clean exit I ona nie uspieć pomnieć to произошло. And she won't have time to understand what happened. I heard it through my office wall on a Tuesday night, 11 months into lessons I'd once thought I'd never finish. Matthew had taken to using the empty office next to mine for his calls now, Carissa's office, vacant since she'd quietly moved her desk closer to mine for reasons neither of us said out loud. 3 weeks, a clean exit. She won't have time to understand. I didn't know which she he meant. Me, Sarah, both. I called William the next morning before I'd even finished my coffee. I need to move faster. He said 3 weeks. Well, we don't have enough yet to go to the police with intent to harm. We have fraud, solid documented fraud, the wire transfers to Bryansk, the falsified vendor records, Carissa's statements. That alone is enough to ruin him. But if you're telling me you think he means physical harm, we need more than 4 words and a guess. I don't have time to wait for more. Then we accelerate the fraud case and freeze him out financially before his 3 weeks are up. We can't arrest a man for a sentence you overheard, but we can take away his exit. That same week, I moved Sarah and Milan into my condo without telling Matthew why. Told him there was a gas leak being inspected at their place, a lie that bought us 4 days. Sarah went along with it more easily than I expected. I think some part of her had started hearing her own version of the silence I'd been living in for almost a year. "Mom," she said on the second night, sitting on my couch with Milan asleep against her shoulder, "is he going to hurt me?" I almost lied to her, almost told her it was just money, just fraud, nothing more. But I was so tired of being the only one who understood what was happening in my own family. "I don't know," I said, "but I'm not taking the chance to find out." I told her everything that night, the stairwell, the policies, Dominic. Nearly a year of secret Russian lessons in Frederick Reese's kitchen because I couldn't trust anyone else to translate what I needed translated in real time. Sarah sat very still through all of it, and when I finished, she didn't cry the way I expected. She just asked, "How long have you known he doesn't love me?" I don't know that he doesn't love me. I know he's planning something. That's not the same thing, and we don't have time to sort out which one it is tonight. William moved fast after that, freezing the logistics account, quietly pulling Matthew's signing authority on 3 accounts under the cover of a routine audit Frederick had originally warned me about almost a year ago. We told Matthew the audit was standard, board-mandated, nothing personal. He didn't fight it. He smiled the same smile he'd given me in the hallway that first morning and said he understood completely. That smile is what scared me more than anything he'd said in Russian all year. 2 nights later, I came home late from the office and found my back door unlocked, the one I always double-check, the one only Sarah, Matthew, and I had keys to. Nothing was missing, nothing was out of place, just one kitchen drawer left slightly open. The drawer where I'd once hidden my very first notebook of Cyrillic letters before I'd moved my lessons to a locked drawer in my office months ago. I stood in my kitchen with my heart slamming against my ribs, staring at that open drawer, and understood with total certainty that Matthew Holland already knew exactly what I'd spent the last year doing. He just hadn't told me that he knew yet. "You knew. The whole time you knew, and you let me believe I was getting away with it." Matthew said it in English, but his voice had nothing left of the smile he'd worn in that hallway 11 months ago.
We were sitting in the same conference room where I'd once watched him calm a nervous client with nothing but charm. William sat to my right with a folder thick enough to need both hands. Sarah sat across from her husband, Milan with my neighbor for the afternoon, and 2 detectives stood near the door, waiting. "Sit down, Matthew," I said. He sat. Of course he sat. He always did what looked reasonable in front of an audience. "We have the wire transfers to Briansk," William said, sliding the folder across the table. 11 months of payments to a shell logistics company run by a man named Dominic Sokolov. We have falsified vendor records signed and submitted by you. We have 2 insurance policies, one on your wife, one on your mother-in-law, both filed without their knowledge, both naming you sole beneficiary. Matthew's jaw tightened, but his face stayed composed, the same careful mask I'd watched him wear at 100 dinner tables. "This is a misunderstanding," he said. "Catherine's never trusted me. You all know that." "3 недели, Dominik. Zakryty shot, czysty wychod, in ana nie uspieje paniać to произошло." The room went silent. Sarah's hand found the edge of the table. Matthew didn't move for a long moment. Then something behind his eyes simply gave out. "You don't speak Russian," he said quietly. "I do now. I've been learning for almost 2 years, since the morning I heard you say my daughter's name on a call you thought no one could understand. You've been spying on me." "I've been protecting my family," I said. "There's a difference." Sarah finally spoke, her voice shaking. "Was any of it real, Matthew? Any of it?" He looked at her, and for 1 second the mask cracked all the way open. "I loved you. I never planned to. That was the part I didn't account for." "Why?" I asked. "Why us? Why this company?" Matthew laughed, short and bitter, nothing like the warm laugh I'd heard him use with Milan 100 times. "You really don't remember him. Victor Holland worked the steel crew 11 years until the scaffolding collapse on the Liberty Avenue site in 2003. The name landed like a stone in my chest. I remembered the accident. I didn't remember a Victor. "He broke his back. Your insurance carrier denied the claim because the paperwork on the safety inspection had a signature missing, yours. You said you'd get it corrected. You never did. Maybe you forgot. Maybe it didn't matter to you. It mattered to us. No settlement, no workers' comp, no income. My mother worked 2 jobs until her heart gave out 4 years later. My father drank himself into the ground within a year after that. I was 11. I sat there, the air gone out of the room, trying to find a memory of a man I apparently owed everything to and couldn't place. I changed my name when my mother remarried. Holland was easy to bury under. I spent 20 years learning how to become exactly the kind of man your company would want to hire. Dominic's my cousin. He helped me move money the same way his side of the family helped mine survive after my father died, the only way we knew. I never wanted Jones Construction's money for its own sake. I wanted you to lose what you built the same way my father lost everything he built. I wanted Sarah's love to be the thing that finally let me inside the house long enough to burn it down. Sarah made a sound like something breaking. I sat with that for a long moment. A missing signature more than 20 years old on a form I likely never saw twice. A small, careless gap that had grown into a child's whole devastated life, and then into this. "I don't remember Victor Holland," I said finally, "and that's not an excuse. That's the problem. A man's family lost everything under my company's name, and I never even knew it happened." "It doesn't change what I did," Matthew said. "No, it doesn't." I looked at William, then at the detectives by the door. Embezzlement, wire fraud, falsified insurance filings, that's not in question. What happens with all of that is. William cleared his throat. Mrs. Jones, given the financial scope, we have more than enough to pursue full charges. I thought about Victor Holland, a man I should have remembered and didn't. I thought about an 11-year-old boy who grew up watching both his parents die because of a piece of paper nobody bothered to fix. Press the fraud charges, I told the detectives. All of it. The wires, the falsified accounts, every dollar moved to Briansk. That part isn't mine to forgive. It's the company's, and the company doesn't get to look away from it. I turned back to Matthew. But I'm asking the court to know what you told us here today, what happened to your father. I'm not going to pretend that excuses any of it, but I'm also not going to pretend it isn't true. Matthew stared at me, and for the first time in 4 years, I saw something other than calculation in his face. I saw a boy who spent 20 years building toward a single afternoon and who hadn't planned for what came after it. The detectives took him out 15 minutes later. Sarah didn't watch him go. It's been 7 months since that day. Sarah still healing, some days better than others. Milan still asks about his daddy-o, and we haven't figured out what to tell him when he's old enough for the real answer. I still meet Frederick for tea twice a week, though we talk about poetry now more than verbs. I went back through every personnel file from 2003 last month. I found Victor Holland's name in less than an hour. It took me 20 years and a federal fraud case to finally go looking. Would you have pressed the fraud charges and shown the mercy I did, or would you have let the whole thing go quiet to protect what was left of your family? I'd like to know what you'd have done in that room.